watching CramerSez. Welcome. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez Project. We are live on a Wednesday. Our guest today is Amy Nelson. Amy's got a very special story to tell you. But before we go into that, let's talk about what the Kramer Project is doing down the road. We are building a brand new news service. We're going to need your help to do it. And we'll be talking more about that here in the next few weeks. We want you to pay attention to what we're doing because for the first time in U.S. history, we think that it's time to get away from the old news model that's sponsored by Big Pharma primarily and put it into the hands of the people. We'll be talking about that in the next few weeks. Let's go to my guest, Amy Nelson. Amy is, let's find out her story because it's interesting. We're seeing that lawfare across the country is being exposed, meaning that big business, rich people have used the law system in our country, the judicial system, against people that they want their land or whatever else. And Amy's husband has gone through that with the Amazon Corporation and Jeff Bezos. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, it's interesting. I've been following your story for the last couple of years, and you and I have talked from time to time about that. Let's start at the beginning. How did this start, and what were the charges against your husband?
Well, I'll start by saying my husband was never charged with any crime, which makes the story, I can tell you, even more wild, given all that happened to him and to our family. But my husband worked for Amazon Web Services, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, for 8 years. He joined the company when it was about 5,000 employees. And AWS builds the cloud, which is where the internet lives. And my husband worked in real estate development. When he joined Amazon, he had Amazon's original employment contract, which in kind of true Jeff Bezos form is like, you can do all of these things while you work for me. You can start another company and seek investment. You can consult for other people. You know, Jeff says he's a libertarian, and that makes good sense. And he also owns a bunch of companies, all that do business with one another. My husband left Amazon in 2019, started his own real estate development company, which is not even competitive to Amazon because they don't sell real estate development services. At the same time, I was building my own company, The Riveter. I had been a lawyer for a decade. And wanted to move away from the law. And the Riveter was building co-working and event spaces for women who were building their own businesses. And I had grown that from an idea to 140 employees in 2.5 years. We also had 4 little girls who were under the age of 6 at the time. In March of 2020, the world changed, the pandemic hit. But a couple weeks into it, on April 2nd, 2020, our world changed because the FBI knocked on our door. It was around 6:45 in the morning. And it was 2 agents, and they told my husband that he was the target of a federal criminal investigation. When they knocked on the door and flashed their badges, I told my husband, as a lawyer, you can't talk to these people without a lawyer. Which I repeat because I want everyone in America to understand that. Yep. A lot of us, when we're approached by law enforcement, are afraid to say we won't speak to you because you sound bad or look bad, but just don't talk to them.
Keep your pie hole shut is what I say. Keep your pie hole shut. Your attorney does all the talking. You don't have to explain anything. The people that are in your home rummaging through your stuff, they don't care. They're doing a job.
Yes, exactly. And we learned, so he learned he was a target of a federal criminal investigation across the country in the Eastern District of Virginia. And we didn't know what he was being investigated for, and I, as a lawyer, I knew everything my husband had done in starting his business and the work he was doing, and I didn't think he'd done anything wrong. And we also got a letter that day that they intended to seize our assets, which I was kind of floored by, what does this even mean? What? They can do that? And we learned over the...
So let me jump back in. So without any charges whatsoever, they have not indicted your husband. They came in and took out all the money out of your bank account.
Well, they didn't immediately. So they told us they intended to do this. And what I learned kind of the process with the DOJ, which I didn't understand at all, having no experience with it, even though I'm a lawyer, is that, when the Department of Justice decides that you have committed a crime, they then have a set of tools they can use to get you to agree with them, whether it's true or not. And frankly, in my experience, I do not think that they care one bit if it's true or not. If they've decided they think you've committed a crime, they're going to do everything they can to get you to plead guilty because they don't want to have to go into a court and prove it. Yep. 98% of Americans who are accused of a federal crime plead guilty. And I have talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people who pled guilty, and most of them don't think they committed a crime. Because this is not we're not talking about murder, right? We're talking about were you completely did you fall within our definition of honesty in a statement you said in one email about one thing 10 years ago, right? Like,
Well,
these
yeah,
are very.
I have some friends here in Indianapolis who went to federal prison for 4 years because they were what do you call it, a third party in an SBA loan. They helped you get an SBA loan, and it was a process crime in that one of the people who came in wrote a check for $50,000 as the down payment, but that money was not in the bank that day. It was placed in the bank the following morning. And the check was processed, and the money was there when the when the check went through. But since my friends knew that money wasn't in there, they said that was fraud. That's how far they stretch the law.
And the truth is, they can, for a bunch of different reasons, and it's very terrifying. But when my husband would not, first of all, in the initial instance, he didn't even know what they were asking him to plead guilty to. He later learned that the alleged crime was called private sector honest services fraud, which is literally saying you deprived your private employer of your, quote, honest services, which is not a defined term. It's not defined in the law. It's not defined anywhere.
Yeah, that could be. That's arbitrary.
Yeah, there are multiple Supreme Court justices who are, like, even just as recently as last year, Justices Thomas and Kavanaugh said, we need to strike this law down. It's ridiculous. Nobody knows what it means. And one of the things about when you're charging, one of the things that criminal law promises us in America is that you have notice of what the law is. So you know if you're breaking it. Anyway, my husband wouldn't plead guilty to this crime because he hadn't committed it. And then the DOJ started executing a set of steps to try to get him to give up, really. First, they, in May of 2020, they seized all of our bank accounts. And again, my husband was never at any point charged with a crime. And they seized his personal accounts, his business accounts, my personal accounts as the CEO of a company.
And you had nothing to do with any of this, the claim. There was your name wasn't on anything, correct?
But sometimes, like, my husband and I would share money because we're married, right? And we're paying for childcare and all these things.
Right.
And they seized money my husband had paid his attorneys from the law firm client trust account. And they seized my father's bank accounts. My father was 2 weeks post-kidney transplant. He had been dying. And they seized his accounts because we were helping him financially.
So they go through these measures, no charges at all, and the only reason they're doing this, in your mind, is to pressure you to plead guilty.
Correct, because it's like, my husband wasn't accused of stealing money from Amazon, right? Like, again, it's a process crime. They took the money, and also there was one point, our lawyers asked the prosecutors, can they have some money back to feed their small children? And there was a prosecutor named Samantha Bateman, who has since left the DOJ. And I've now since learned that at the time she was, working on this investigation, her husband's law firm, which was very small, was representing Amazon in a private FTC investigation that no one knew about. So that, first of all, is like devastating. But we asked if we could have some money back to feed our kids, and Samantha Bateman said, you can have some money to feed your kid. They can have some money to feed their kids if you will plead guilty. Otherwise, tough luck. And I realized then that, like, these people were willing to sacrifice my children for Amazon to get their, piece of flesh. They also, 2 weeks after they seized all of our assets and months into this investigation, when my husband knew of the investigation, when the DOJ knew that my husband was represented by lawyers, when the DOJ knew that my husband had a business attorney during all of the actions they said were criminal, they obtained a search warrant to raid our home. They came in, 4 agents, guns out, our 4 little girls, pre-dawn. It was a moment that changed my life forever because it is terrifying.
Yep.
And people get killed in those kind of actions. But when they came in, they took stacks of attorney-client printed material that said attorney-client privileged. And I later learned, when I found the unsealed search warrant years later on a public docket, that they had put in the affidavit that they were going to take communications between my husband and his attorney, and did not put in the affidavit to the judge that the attorney, his name, that he was an attorney.
Wow.
So that we'll take communications between Carl Nelson and Rod Atherton, and did not tell the judge he was an attorney and my husband's attorney. It's just so malicious,
Well, do you see the similarities between what happened to your husband and what we saw happen to Trump over the last 2 years? Very similar, correct?
Very similar, and I mean, even more so, because one of the things I think is most remarkable what happened to my husband, the DOJ investigation is now over. So much has happened, but we were able to get the communications between Amazon's lawyers and the Department of Justice because Amazon sued my husband after they knew his assets had been taken. Like they needed a leg up, like, right? Like, you're a $1 trillion company with an army of lawyers, but let's make sure this guy has no money to defend himself. And we did, and to be fair, like, we did beat Amazon in the civil lawsuit too, right? Like, the judge tossed it out before trial and just excoriated Amazon for essentially lying about a bunch of different things. Anyway, we saw the communications between Amazon and the DOJ, and what I learned and what I think, we all knew about Trump, whether you loved Trump or hated him, you knew that there was an agenda, right? There was a political agenda here. And in my husband's case, when we got the communications between Amazon and the DOJ, Amazon was represented by a former federal prosecutor from the Eastern District of Virginia, who quite literally called up his friends who he used to work with and said, I need this investigation. And, at the time, a woman named Jessica Aber was the deputy criminal chief of the office. And she wrote in an email to Amazon's lawyer, Pat Stokes, please don't worry. I have hand selected my 2 very best prosecutors for your important matter. Like, what? I've listened to Merrick Garland promise us a million times. There's one rule of law for all, not one for the rich and one for the poor, one for the powerful and one for those without power. And that email destroys everything Merrick Garland ever said. Because who gets the B team prosecutors? I know who it is now. It's the Olympic gymnasts, right? Like, that the FBI just ignored because they were looking for jobs from USA Gymnastics. It's the victims of Epstein. And what I now understand is it's a business, right? The business of prosecution is a business. Like, the people that went after Trump went into private practice and make millions of dollars trading on their relationships with DOJ, or they did, and now I think it's going to be a different paradigm. And, the people, like, listen, Patrick Stokes, who represented Amazon, went into private practice. He'd never been a private practice lawyer. And he needs to trade on his relationships with DOJ to make money.
Right.
And the people still at DOJ at the time who promised Pat their best lawyers, they knew they were going to leave DOJ and they would need jobs too.
Yeah, I think it's scary to hear the federal government come in and say and basically partner with a billionaire and his company to go after a private citizen.
Yeah, to the point, Emma, I'll tell you, this was mind-blowing to me. So eventually a federal judge said that my husband, in a civil case, had completely adhered to the terms of Amazon's employment contract. Okay, it couldn't go to trial. It was so clear. That is a final judgment. Now, Amazon said my husband criminally violated those terms. I learned and have in writing from the DOJ that they did not even review or ask for my husband's employment terms when Amazon told them my husband had criminally violated them.
Well, isn't that kind of the starting point? I'm sorry, shouldn't that be the starting point for all of this? That's the basis what they're making their claims on.
Yeah. And I think that I step back and I look at the overarching picture of our justice system, which is a farce at this point, right? Because prosecutors are coming at it from the position of, we can get people to plead, hellfire and fury, take their money, threaten their loved ones, raid their homes, they'll lose their jobs, they'll just plead. So we don't need to investigate. Right. And I think in my family situation, what prosecutor would possibly think that an American family would be able to withstand a $1 trillion company and the DOJ? And so they just didn't give a shit. They just did what they wanted and didn't check any box. And we were able to stay alive to systematically prove kind of the horrors of what they'd done. And we won't get into the details, but we got the FBI agent who ran the investigation, kicked off the investigation. We got one of the prosecutors, Matthew Burke, who at one point called all of Amazon's targets with Amazon on the phone and said, if you don't stop defending yourself in the civil case, you will get what you deserve. We'll find a way to charge you with perjury or obstruction of justice. He was removed from the investigation. And 2 things about that. Also on the call was a man named Jamar Walker, who is now a federal judge in the Eastern District of Virginia. And he ran the investigation into my family, and his contribution to that phone call was, I want to make sure no one's recording this. and I'll tell you, I recorded it. So I have it recorded, right? Because it's legal to do so. Right. And it's horrifying that he asked us not to record it. And that was reported on by the Washington Post. And he was then nominated for a judgeship and confirmed. No one cares. Nobody cares.
Well, that's what I found in politics is that the machine is so big, Amy. There's so much money to be made that the system, the machine expects you to go along because of the money that's there. I had a falling out with the Republican Party in the state of Indiana. They told me to shut my mouth about COVID going into the 2020 election because, hey, we're going to have a problem getting the governor reelected. And if you don't shut your pie hole, we're going to rethink our relationship with you. They thought that they could I made about $400,000 a year from them. So they thought that they could put that almost $500,000 up there, and that I was so greedy and I was so soulless that I would sell my soul so that they could continue what they were doing. And it's rampant across the country. Amy, we'll be right back after this message. And I want to hear about Jessica Aber. She died a few weeks ago, and she's part of this. Let's talk about that when we get back.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
From the halls of Congress
Across the nation.
and around the globe.
You're getting the latest news and conservative views.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
Global news with local views.
CramerSez returns after this message from our partners.
Introducing Tusk,
With Tusk, you get uncensored news and secure browsing.
all while protecting your privacy.
Choose the news you trust and take control of your internet.
Join the free speech revolution with Tusk.
Download Tusk today at tuskbrowser.com.
The CramerSez Project is back.
With global news and local views.
You're watching the CramerSez Project.
You're watching CramerSez.
Welcome back. This is the CramerSez Project. It is Wednesday, the 9th. I had to look at the actual calendar. Our guest today is Amy Nelson. Amy's going through a problem with Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and the DOJ and the FBI. They've been working on this or fighting this for the last few years. Her story continues. Jessica Aber was in the news here in the last few weeks because she was found dead. She was a high-powered U.S. attorney, died under mysterious circumstances. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I just look at the things the way that they are and say, well, that doesn't sound right. Does that sound like something weird to you? And what role did she play in all of this?
So, I think any death is tragic, right? I think it's very sad that she died a very untimely death at the age of 43.
Yeah.
I think it is surprising. Her family released a statement that they believe it's related to a long-standing health concern or issue she had, epilepsy. I don't know. We haven't seen the final medical examiner's report, so I guess that's what will tell us what the truth is.
Right.
But I think, Jessica Aber, she was the person who initiated the investigation internally. She was in charge of the criminal division in 2020, and then she was appointed as U.S. attorney when Biden came into office, but she'd been a career public servant. I think I often wonder how she could have done the things she did to my family. I take great issue with it. One thing that I think is really interesting about the DOJ, so different from corporate America, where merit matters in many ways. Jessica Aber and Jack Smith prosecuted Governor Bob McDonnell in Virginia, the Republican governor, for honest services fraud, and his wife. They won, and it was overturned 9-0 by the Supreme Court, which is just a resounding, defeat.
Right.
And yet, great, Jack and Jessica will promote you to higher positions at the DOJ. Like, what is that, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it does to me. It makes perfect sense to me, because what they found is somebody higher up in the government has found an attack dog that they can rely on, they can count on. Right?
Yeah.
And that attack dog is for sale. Whether it be for cash or for promotions, whatever, it's still the same thing. They're selling the office for gain, correct?
They are. And there was something I found out related to Jessica Aber's death that, it really did stun me in a way that I didn't think anything else that happened with my family could surprise me. But, I'm a researcher, I'm a lawyer. I used to have a column for Forbes and one for Inc. And someone posted like the 911 call on Twitter or on X, and I was looking at it and it had her address. And so I just kind of looked up her address and I was like, wow, it's a $2 million home. That's really surprising for a public servant. And I knew she was divorced and single. And I looked up the property records for the home. She co-owned the home with her former DOJ boss, who was now in private practice at a law firm in DC. And this particular law firm in DC is where Amazon's business compliance and ethics attorney, Yusri Omar, who has hunted my family, worked at in the DC office, and where Amazon's capital partner, who's also, been going after my family, IPI, where their general counsel also worked in that small DC office of that law firm. And even more troubling is that when one of Amazon's other targets, a man named Casey Kirshner, when the government seized his money, he had no money. And the FBI agent in charge of the investigation helpfully called up Casey and said, "We're getting you a public defender." And the public defender sent an email to law firms in Washington, D.C. and said, will any of you help us pro bono? One law firm responded, and it was the law firm of Jessica Aber's partner, of the man she lived with and owned a home with.
Oh, wow.
Never disclosed to Casey. And the partner at the law firm who helped Casey told him he had no defenses and he should immediately plead guilty. I find all of this, and this is what I've been told, and I find all of this to be grounds for investigation, like disbarment. I mean, that is shocking.
Yeah, and bold. I mean, it's not like we can't find the path that the attorney that you've assigned to me is part of your husband's or your boyfriend or whoever with the relationship is firm. I mean, that makes that is a conflict of interest bigger than shit. I mean, there's no other way to say it.
I don't know, nobody knew that was her partner. I didn't know that was her partner for 4 years. You know what I mean? And I will also say that I think that I am a litigator, and I think a lot of lawyers think very highly of themselves, and that nobody will dig into relationships and who knows who and who's working with who. And as a storyteller, as an entrepreneur, I understand relationships are everything, and that is the first place I go, right? Because
Fannie Willis and her boyfriend proved that.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they're always there. You can always find the connections. It's like you look at I forget her name, but everyone's like, how did Boeing get away with that sweetheart deal, that non-prosecution deal, after all those people died in those planes?
Yep.
Well, the investigation was being done in one of the federal districts in Texas. And the woman who was the U.S. attorney at the time, Erin Neely Cox, I think her name is, she left the U.S. attorney's office and went back to the law firm that represented Boeing.
Wow.
It's
incestuous.
What's the point? What's the point of it, right? It doesn't benefit anyone, but then it benefits the lawyers.
Well, it benefits the lawyers, and it benefits those that get to do what they want to do and mow down everybody else in their path. They use the system to continue to generate wealth for themselves, and they don't care how many lives they destroy in the path. We were talking before we start recording. I had a similar situation with the COVID, what happened during it, how it affected my company. And you try to come back around. I just decided, I was almost 60 years old. I said, screw it, I'm going to retire. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity, right? And you had to fight. I mean, you're still young at this point. You're not ready to retire. So talk to me about, Carl goes through this process, never charged. How does that affect his ability to go out and get other business inside the industry that he's built his career on?
It's really it's been devastating and heartbreaking. He is in real estate development still, and my husband is someone who just does not give up. And he is also, he has developed more square footage of data centers than probably anyone in the world. So he is an expert, and he's been able to rebuild. But he was, I guess, one of the hardest things to acknowledge is more than the career. It takes the sparkle out of someone. It takes it takes who they are.
Their joy.
The essence of him was gone for a very long time, because he had to wake up every day and be like, I might go to prison and miss my daughters growing up.
Yeah. It's devastating what people can do, and if listening to your story, it's no different than what happened to Trump. But we can go back through history and find out where this has happened time and time again. I mean, the sheriff of Nottingham, right, and Robin Hood even did the exact same thing, because it's human nature to use your power to get what you want, and we see this continuing to happen. Amy, what do you think the path is? How do we stop this? Is the machine too big and too corrupt?
I don't think it is. I think you can stop it, but somebody with power needs to make the decision to stop it. My husband and I are going back to the Department of Justice next week in the Eastern District of Virginia, because we got back 85% of the money that the government seized. One thing with civil forfeiture is you don't have due process.
Right.
You're not entitled to a speedy hearing. There's nothing. And so the government held our money for 22 months, at which point a judge said, you should probably like try to prove the reason you took the money. And then the DOJ said, well, if we give you back 85%, will you agree not to sue us? And a lot of people have said to us, we never would have taken that deal. But when you have 4 kids to feed, you're trying to battle Amazon in court, like, yeah, we obviously took the deal. But, you know, the government since then decided not to charge my husband, and not only not charge my husband, but they vacated pleas from alleged co-conspirators because they had lies in them. And so we believe they should vacate the settlement and give us back the rest of the money. And, you know, we're going back and saying, like, look, we can show you boom, 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 like lie, and writing, you know, by Amazon's lawyers. And we're going back and saying, you clearly want to investigate this, right? Because if DOJ allows Amazon's lawyers to lie with impunity to them, to weaponize the FBI and the DOJ, that is a message to Jeff Bezos, to anyone, to any billionaire, any $1 trillion company with access. We're here for you. We're here to serve you. You can lie to us. We will tear apart families and companies. Like, let's do it. Yep. And I have to believe the DOJ won't let that happen. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm wrong. But like, there is a chance for that to happen.
What I've seen in government is that the majority of people in government are not like you and I. Right? They're not successful. They're not dreamers. They're not people that go build shit. They're the people that stand around. They're the Karens that tell us what we have to do with the shit that we've built.
Well, and it is also true, like, it is so much easier to destroy something than it is to build something. Yeah, and like, I'm convinced part of the reason my husband and I survived this is because we're builders.
Amy, it took me 35 years to build my company. And in COVID, it was destroyed in 2 days. 2 days. When the shutdowns started happening, I was done. 35 years worth of work gone in 2 days because of a decision by a scared politician. And they were fearful, right? They were fearful of the disease that they feared, but more importantly, they were fearful of the people, that they would be blamed for not doing anything. So what they did is they just infringed on all of our rights, and the same thing continues here. If you think there's any difference whatsoever, there's none. Using the power that you have to destroy lives, well, I think it's criminal, and I think it's worth the death penalty. That's where I am with it. And I know that you may not be there yet, but I worked my entire life to build a great company, and they destroyed it in 2 days. I had no control.
I know, and you and like we were chatting before we started. Like, I had the Riveter of my company was building co-working spaces, and you know, I had taken on a significant amount of investment, and I had just, to be honest, like, I had done an incredible job, and we were on track to generate $20 million in revenue in our 3rd year of business, and it was gone in 48 hours. Yep. And you know, everyone in America, it's like, they're like, well, okay, well, your situation is your situation. Like, you pissed off a billionaire. Well, like, how did my husband know he was pissing off a billionaire? By abiding by the literal terms of the billionaire's contract, right? Yep. But it couldn't happen to me. Maybe not this specific thing, but it is clear and should be clear to everyone in America that the government can take everything you have, whenever they want to, however they want to. And that is not freedom. No. That is not freedom. I mean, that's like, my 5-year-old this morning was explaining to me like this concept. She's like, the government can take everything. Yep. And I'm like, they can. And so, you know, but you can also fight back and make sure you don't let them. And that's what she's growing up with the knowledge of.
One of the things that the government relies on is the anonymity of government. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And here's what's interesting. To your point, when you start digging into relationships and you find out who's connected to who and who's talking to who, I mean, we saw that during the Trump, witch hunt, where you've got the husband in the DOJ working with the wife at the CIA or whatever their relationship was. But my point is that for us to think that these people go home and drop what they did at work during the day and they don't talk to their friends inside. I worked in politics. They're constantly on the phone gossiping all the time.
Constantly. It's ridiculous. And the reason I was so excited that you said this is like, I truly believe the fact that, we named names the whole way through this, and it made Amazon's lawyers so angry to the point where, I started a TikTok about a year and a half into this. I got a job with a public company that was going to pay like $1 million a year with shares. And I was like, I've saved my family. This is spectacular. They fired me on the 5th day because they read about the civil forfeiture. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter if I'm quiet. Like, I am part of this. And like, I'm done being quiet. I'm going in and I'm just going to start telling the story. Yeah. And I've never been on TikTok. And I just downloaded the app and started telling the story. I now have 250,000 followers that tune in. But I named the names of the lawyers that were doing this, and I put their pictures up because they're signing public documents. And I always say, Amazon did nothing to my family. People did. Amazon's a logo.
Exactly.
Can't do anything,
Exactly.
Right? It doesn't breathe.
Yep.
So, and they made them so mad to the point where at one point, Amazon's lawyer, Patrick Stokes, sent me a letter on behalf of Amazon telling me that if I did not stop naming their names on TikTok, they were going to go tell the DOJ I was federally witness tampering. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, I'm not stopping my TikToks. Go sound banned. But if I had been someone who didn't understand the law or was afraid, maybe I would have.
Right.
I mean, but they made a big mistake. But when you bring guns and take all of our money and threaten my husband's freedom, it takes a lot more to make me afraid of something.
And that's the American spirit, Amy. That's what we're known for, is that we do not give up. Right?
Yeah.
The American spirit is unlike anything else in the world. I've traveled the planet, and there's something missing in their souls. These other people around the planet, they do not have the spark that we have in this nation.
You don't.
Go ahead.
And one thing I think is really interesting too, I thought a lot about our founding fathers through this process. Because at one point I said to my mom, I was I don't know if I can be an American anymore. America tried to destroy me. And my mother, who's amazing and worked her way through college, was a brilliant teacher. She said, you're more American than any of the people doing this to you.
Right.
You're the one fighting to protect your rights. They're the ones who are not following the law or abiding by the Constitution.
Right.
And it made me think of the founding fathers and something I'd never appreciated. But our founding fathers were all accused criminals.
Yep, every one of them.
And they built the Bill of Rights, and 4 of the 10 Bill of Rights are built to protect the rights of those in America who are accused.
Yep.
And the way we built this country today is we accuse you, you're guilty. Prove your innocence.
Yep.
It's the upside down. And it's a shameful thing.
I think that our founding fathers would be rolling in their graves for what they've seen in the last 40 years in this nation, in particular the last 4 years, and how lawfare was used not just against Trump. It was used against a bunch of different people, including your family. Amy, do you think that the process that we have in place right now, there's a conversation going on about the federal courts being eliminated because they're not constitutional. They were created by Congress out of thin air. Do you see the potential of that going away and that maybe changing the system, that what Trump is doing is trying to reset our government back to 1776 so it operates more in that manner as opposed to what it's been doing?
I mean, look, I think the judiciary is an incredibly important part of our three entity system. I think it really matters. And I think an independent judiciary is incredibly important. And the way our court system works today is that it doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work unless it serves those with a lot of money and power,
right,
and you're screwed otherwise.
Yep.
And the truth is, if my husband and I hadn't been able to come up with millions of dollars to fight Amazon, which we did because we're both entrepreneurs, and we ended up selling our home, liquidating retirement, and then just hustling to make money. And then we borrowed money and raised money. If we hadn't been able to come up with the millions of dollars to fight to prove my husband's innocence, he would have been screwed. And that is a court system that doesn't work. And it's the same on the civil side, right?
Well, it's a shame that you had to put yourself into, I'm going to use the word poverty, but you had to strip yourself of all your wealth to be able to defend yourself against something that you didn't do. And then they walk away and don't care. They just move on to the next target.
It's another day that ends in Y for them. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do is there need to be repercussions. If prosecutors, state, federal, I don't care, go after someone with maliciousness or lying or something, there needs to be some sort of consequence. And on the civil side too, in many countries, if you are sued and you defend yourself and you win, the plaintiff has to pay the legal fees. That is not the rule in America.
No.
It's sorry, too bad for you.
And which doesn't stop anybody from suing. If I had to pay, if they win, I'm going to be reluctant to make a lawsuit unless I've got everything for me to win, correct?
And that even if we had that rule, it wouldn't stop an organization like Amazon who doesn't care. Also, legal fees are deductible for corporations, and that has got to stop. If they're plaintiffs, right? I think legal fees should be deductible for defense, but not for bringing lawsuits and being a law-carrying company. Bullshit. So that has to change. But the court systems are completely broken, and someone needs to address it. I do think I disagree with some of what Trump's doing, and I do think that part of what he is doing in his way is trying to break the business of the DOJ and trying because it can't be a business. That has to stop. I mean, since you probably don't know this, but when Amazon sued my husband. They went in on one day and tried to get a temporary restraining order, which you can kind of game the system to figure out who the judge is going to be.
Right.
And they got a judge who's a former federal prosecutor. Judge oversees the case. He's giving every ruling to Amazon. I mean, bananas. Like he made one of the defendants put up like a $21 million preliminary injunction without any evidence. Required no evidence from Amazon. Just like, okay. And which is unheard of. Anyway, a couple years into this, before the case has gone into discovery, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal about judicial conflicts of interest. I go look at the source material and figure out that the judge we have owns Amazon stock. You are not supposed to be seeing cases where you own stock in one of the parties.
Right.
The Wall Street Journal calls him up and confirms this. And then the judge refuses to recuse himself. Why did he care?
Yep.
And so then it went on to the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and then the judge recused himself. And I do not believe, if it had not been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, that the judge would have recused himself.
Yep.
He did it because he was publicly kind of ashamed.
Yep.
And the only reason it was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal is because I know how to use X and DM journalists and know how to articulate what's happening. And a lot of people don't.
Yep.
Like, you shouldn't have to have all of this experience to be able to survive this.
Well, and that I had a situation with a client years ago that they had not paid a bill. It was several $1,000s, and so they told me that we could go to court. Just sue me. I'm not going to I know the process. It's not worth it to sue them, right? But it was worth it for me to go hire a guy for $15 an hour to stand out in front of their establishment with a sign saying, "These people don't pay their bills." Within 3 days, I had my money, all of it. So, there's different ways to skin a cat. I'm a big believer in what Trump is doing. And to your point, I don't agree with everything that he's doing either. People seem to think that if you voted for Trump and you like what he's doing, that you're 100% in. I'm not. What he's done with TikTok, I think TikTok should be banned immediately. It's a threat to this nation. But he got a bunch of kid voters on there, so he's going to keep it around for a while. We'll see how that goes. Let's talk about the social media part of it. When you went to TikTok and you went to Instagram and so on, you gained a lot of followers. What was the response from people there? Were they as pissed off as you are about it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as with anything on social media, it's probably like 90% a lot of support, and then 10% just like, you look guilty, things like that. But or something bad must have happened. But I think one of the reasons TikTok was important to me is that no corporate platform of journalism has dug into the story. I mean, it's a story where pleas are vacated, which never happens. Money seized is given back. Conflicted judges are out. Involves Jeff Bezos. It's a hell of a story.
It really is.
But no one will cover it because guess who sustains the corporate media? Amazon. Yep. They are the biggest buyer of global ads in the world. And so you have a situation where with the corporate media, Jeff Bezos can do whatever the hell he wants. Yep. He decides the stories you hear, the news you read. And so without TikTok, I wouldn't have been able to shine a light on this. And that can't be the world. And I think that is it might be a very particular thing to Jeff Bezos, but he has enough power that it's a terrifying thing. And so, but I think, and one of the things I hope I shared with people is that when you are accused of doing something bad, people tell you to be quiet, to stay small, right? That's what they expect you to do. Yep. Don't do that. Nope. If you did nothing wrong, do not stay quiet, do not be small.
Nope. Be the loudest squawking bird you can be. Let everybody know what's going on. Scream and yell. Yes, you'll look crazy. Yes, you'll look insane. Until people come around and go, well, he's not insane. I mean, imagine if you told your story prior to it happening, that this happened to somebody else. They came into the home, they destroyed their lives, took all their money, right? And then never charged anybody with anything. I mean, that makes no sense to me other than somebody did not like your husband. I mean, I'm one of those guys, I know how the system works. It could be somebody as little as he pissed off somebody at Amazon, right?
No, it's about a contract. Amazon and their business partner, IPI, broke a contract with a real estate developer. And the clear language in the contract says they can only do it if he is convicted of or pleads guilty to a felony. They broke the contract on February 19, 2020. Wow. Their first in-person meeting with DOJ was 7 hours later. It's not complicated. That's the other thing. It's so transparent. Right. And the contract was worth $500 million.
Yep.
So, it's a big deal. And the real estate developer that they did this to is now suing Amazon and IPI for a total of $4 billion. Wow. So this is ongoing and a very big deal. But you shouldn't be able to weaponize the DOJ for contract issues. That's a wrong, right?
Okay, last question here. What's the answer? So in your mind, how do we get past this? How do we stop the DOJ and the FBI and even local municipalities from doing the same thing?
We have to find the line between total qualified immunity and people taking prosecutors and police to court all the time. And the line is not qualified immunity, right? Like, we need to find some way to hold prosecutors or law enforcement who do illegal things or bad things accountable. And we just don't have that now. I also think, there's some simple things that could help us get there in terms of transparency. Like police cams are great, right? The wearable cameras. I'm so glad police have that. It allows us to see what happens. I think it serves both the police and potential victims, right? Because we can literally see what's happening. The FBI, they not only don't have cameras. Like, when you're doing a non-custodial interview, they don't record it. Although we carry around these recording devices, the FBI is like, no, we'll just remember what you said to us.
I'm going to take some notes. We'll take notes.
I mean, that's ridiculous. It is so dumb. Like, there's no way to explain that decision other than we want to say whatever we want to say. So, that is one thing.
Can you, in that process, record your own?
Yes, you can, and so people should do that too. But it is terrifying. I think back, I wish I'd been recording things from day one. But on day one, I was scared and I didn't understand and I didn't know.
Right.
And and so I think it's really important, to take your phone on. And it's interesting because then the FBI will probably say, we don't want to talk to you now, right?
Right.
But you should record everything because I guess they won't. But I think that is really important. Then I think too, I don't think we should live in a country where 98% of allegations end in plea bargaining.
Yep.
I think we should get rid of the things that lead to plea bargaining, no pre-indictment civil forfeiture. In America, you get credit if you plea and point the finger at someone else.
Yep.
Do away with that.
Yep.
Do not give someone credit for doing that, right?
Yep.
It leads to wrong outcomes.
Well, exactly, because it's an ambulance chaser of the court system.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that my experience has been, I've learned that you cannot trust anyone with your freedom.
Yeah.
When the police knock on the door, keep your fucking pie hole shut. Your attorney will do all the talking. You don't have to scream and yell at the guys at the door because they have nothing to do with what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Right? What's going to happen next? Those people are invisible to you at this point. And so you learn through that process who they are and what we found. And again, your story shows that the lawfare that was used against Trump is rampant throughout our legal system and has to stop.
It is, and I think when take a step back, and from a bigger picture, if we know that corporations and powerful people are weaponizing federal law, maybe, and I do think I see Kash Patel and DOJ doing this now. They're going after violent crimes.
Right.
Maybe we should leave these corporate allegations of crime to states. Maybe we don't why does it my husband was investigated in the Eastern District of Virginia for actions he took as an employee in Seattle, Washington. Why? Right? You know what I mean? It's because that's what Amazon chose. And because
that's what they shot.
Hard charts.
They went and found a judge that would do what they wanted to do. They shopped the judge and then made the case.
Yeah, I'll tell you, no one has ever been charged with private sector honest services fraud in the Western District of Washington. Right. So it's and I also think EDVA, where this happened, is where they went after Snowden and Manafort, and it's they're known as the big bad prosecutors that will take anyone on. So I don't know. I think there are a lot of reforms we could have, and I hope that we do have change, but it's very hard to convince the people in power who like their power to change the structure.
Yeah. And not enough people have been harmed by it to go push it. So it sits there and they continue to do what they've been doing. And why what's happening in this country right now is exactly why people fled Europe and came here and said, we want to set up a bunch of rules that doesn't allow that to happen. And now we're back in the same system.
Well, and I don't think that we don't have conversations now that the DOJ investigation is over. It's should we go live in a foreign country?
Yeah.
Because I don't, we're rebuilding, but will they always target us because Jeff Bezos told them to?
Yep. That's the danger you live in. Amy, where can people find you on social media?
So I'm on all of the channels at Amy_K_Nelson. And my company is The Riveter Co. If anyone's interested in that, we're on all the channels too. But thank you so much for having me, Tim.
Well, thank you for joining me. I've been following your story for a while, and I wanted to get more details about it. And I'm so glad. I'll ask you one last question as we leave. With Trump being in office, do you think that you have a better chance now of getting your husband's name cleared and all the money back versus what we had to look forward to?
I want to say yes. I think I did believe that a couple months ago. But now that Bezos is visiting the White House regularly and donating lots of money, I don't know. And I want to be proven wrong.
I hope you are. I hope you are. I hope you are. Thank you so much. We'll be back next time. See you. Bye-bye.
For watching Kramer Says Live.
This concludes this broadcast.
Please follow, like, and subscribe to be notified the next time
The CramerSez project goes live.